Okay, so here we are now looking at the reading section of paper 1, and there are 4 questions. Now we will have an hour to do these because we've spent 45 minutes of the total hour and 45 minutes doing question 5, that writing question. So we're now left with an hour to work through these 4 reading questions. And we can see that half of the marks for the reading section is for this question 4. And because of that, we need to be aware that we need to leave about half an hour, 25 minutes to do this question 4. So at 10:45, half an hour before the end of the exam, you're going to be switching on to this question 4. Okay, so we're getting ready to start the reading questions, and key to this is working out what it is you're going to be reading. Now, all we know is that it's going to be a page from a story, so a piece of creative writing, a page from a story. So we need to try and work out what's going on before we start actually looking at the story. And to do that, you can use the cover and the box, and I'll explain what the box is, to find out what it is you're going to be reading and answering these 4 questions on. So this is the front page of, they call it the insert, they call it the source, they call it the extract. It's basically the page from the story. And this is the cover of this insert. And it tells you, probably not that usefully, that it's called A Sound of Thunder and that the author is somebody called Ray Bradbury. And it tells us that it's from the middle of a short story published in 1952. So none of which is that helpful in working out, what it is you're going to be reading. But the box, which appears at the beginning of the extract, is really important. Okay, so there is the box at the top again, and that is really your main focus, and it's going to tell you a lot about what you're going to read. It's going to tell you about who's in the story, the characters, where we are, the setting, and also something about what's happening when we enter the story. So in this box it says, using a time machine, an organisation called Time Safari transports clients into the past to take part in hunting expeditions. A group that includes Mr. Eccles, together with their guide Travis, is visiting a prehistoric jungle in order to shoot a Tyrannosaurus Rex. So there's a lot of information there that's going to help you orientate to the extract. It's telling you a lot of information about who's going to be in the story. It also tells you where the story is set, and it's also giving you information about what's happening, the plot. Now, if you don't read that box, it's going to be extremely confusing when you start reading the extract. This is, in particular, this is a very unusual setting with unusual characters. So the message really to you is the box is so important. Make sure you read it and try and work out who, where and what. Okay, so what do these 4 questions look like? Well, actually, they're very predictable. We know what they're going to be. And this is what the 4 questions look like on the page. Now, you'll get a really big booklet to write your answers in, most of which is blank pages, actually way too many pages than you would probably need. But the actual questions are just these 4 boxes. And once you're familiar with these 4 questions, then you will see them repeated in every exam. The wording and the layout is almost identical in every single exam, and there's really only a few key bits that in the exam you need to focus on. Okay, so what I've got here are the important bits of the 4 questions, and it's, as we say, it's only the bits in red. There's only a small amount of information that you need to find out on the day. Everything else is exactly the same. So when you open the exam paper, it will always say, list 4 things about something. Question 2 will always read, how does the writer describe something? That's the bit that's going to change. Question 3, there is no change whatsoever on every single exam. The question remains, how has the writer structured the text to interest a reader? So that's exactly the same every single time. And question 4, the important 20-mark one, is where it will say a student said, and you'll get a statement of some fictitious student giving an opinion about the extract, and you're invited to agree with it. To what extent do you agree? So for example, the paper that we're looking at, the question was list 4 things about the jungle. And question 2 was, how does the writer describe the T-Rex? And the statement that you are invited to evidence and agree with is where it said, Eccles is right to panic, the monster's terrifying. So when you get into the exam and you look at the questions, it's really only these bits in red that are the kind of unpredictable bit. Everything else is entirely known before you start. Okay, so this is the extract, and you see you've got on the left hand side you've got line numbers. They're numbering every 5th line of the text. This is a bit longer than a page, and the reason for that is there's a lot of dialogue. So there's lots of very short pieces, so that in terms of word count, it's the same, about a page if it was all in more dense paragraphs. And the actual link to this extract, this insert, is there for you to look at if you want to see it in a different format. Okay, so we've read the box, we know what to expect in the extract, we've scanned the questions and we know what the bits in red are, and now I just wanted to give you some general advice about these reading questions. So this is the reading section. You are not given any marks for writing, so you are writing your answers, but you don't get any marks for accuracy, so you don't need to worry about spelling or punctuation. You're not marked on the accuracy of your writing, you're really just marked on the points that you make and the quotes and explanations you use to make those points. The other thing is it's very intimidating looking at that quite long piece of reading. You only need to make a couple of points to get a grade 4. You don't have to read or understand every single word of the text. In fact, it would be extremely unusual if there wasn't some stuff in there that you don't understand. So we're just going to focus on what we do understand and pick bits and quotes from the bits that you feel confident about. Okay, so this is question 1. 4 marks. You only should be taking about 4 to 5 minutes. Some people even take less. And it's asking you to list 4 things about the jungle. And it wants you to just look at lines 1 to 9. And you just make a list of 4 things. There's no interpretation, there's no working things out. You're literally lifting information from the page. So even on the first few words, 4 things about the jungle, your first answer might be the jungle was high, and that would be 1 mark. You might then write the jungle was broad, and that's your second mark. there will always be at least 4, probably as many as 8 different points you could make. So that's your question 1. It's a gentle start, it's quite straightforward. So question 2, how does the writer use language to describe, and in this case it's the T-Rex. So we're looking at descriptions of this thing. And language really just means the words that the writer's chosen, which the examiner wants you to say, I get that they've chosen this particular word because it makes the reader feel a certain way about the T-Rex. Now, the extract that they gave you for this past paper, it's got a really long, dense paragraph of description. Now, you only really need to pick 2 or 3 quotes that describe the T-Rex that you can talk about in the exam. You've only got 15 minutes, so 2 or 3 is probably as many as you can do in the time. And what makes a good quote? Well, a good quote is obviously something that's describing the T-Rex, but it also needs to have words in there that you understand and can explain. And ideally, it also has some language features that you can focus in on. Now, the process that you go through to answer this question is this point, evidence, explain. So you're going to say what it's like, what the T-Rex is like, then you're going to back that point up with a quote, and then you're going to look at the words in your quote and explain them to the examiner, show that you understand the language, you understand the words. And if you can, you're going to use some subject terminology at least once. Subject terminology is just those sort of technical words that are used in the study of literature. So adjective, verb, simile, any of those things, and you only really need to do that once in your answer. And here is a writing frame to help you structure your answer that I suggest you use. So you would start by saying the T-Rex is whatever it is you think what it's like. Then it says, and you back it up with a quote. And then the last part is when you zoom in on words in the quote and explain what they mean. So we're going to put into practice this point, evidence, explain process, looking at this particular extract. So I've just got the first 2 sentences here. It came on great, oiled, resilient, striding legs. It towered 30 feet above half of the trees, a great evil god, folding its delicate watchmaker's claws close to its oily reptilian chest. Now that is quite intimidating. There's some vocabulary in there that's tricky. Resilient, reptilian, delicate, striding. These are all quite tricky words, but I'm not going to let that put me off. I'm going to focus on the words I do understand, and I'm going to build my answer around those quotes. So the first quote I've picked is right at the beginning, and it says great oiled legs. So how am I going to use that quote, that description of this T-Rex's legs? I'm going to say something like, for my point, the T-Rex is extremely big and powerful. It says great oiled legs. So that's the first 2 bits. Now I have to zoom in on some words in my quote and explain to the examiner that I get what these words mean. So I might zoom in on the word oiled. Now I know that oiled in this sentence is an adjective. It's describing his legs. So instead of saying the word, I'm going to take that out and I'm going to say the adjective, get me some extra marks for subject terminology. And I'm going to say the adjective oiled suggests that the T-Rex is almost like a machine. Or I might zoom in on the word great and say the adjective great suggests that the T-Rex is the greatest, most powerful creature in the jungle. Okay, let's pick another quote. So my second quote I've picked, it towered 30 feet above half the trees. So what point can I make from that quote? Well, it's obviously massively tall, so maybe my point's going to be around that. The T-Rex is very, very tall, as big as a building. It says it towered 30 feet above half the trees. And I know that towered is a verb, so I'm not going to say the word towered, I'm going to say the verb towered suggests how big the T-Rex is, that it's like a tall tower, a tall building that is so high it's looking down on even the tops of the trees. And then for my final quote, I've looked at this phrase, a great evil God. And I'm going to make a point again. I'm going to say the T-Rex is a dangerous, frightening, powerful beast. It says a great evil God. And then again, I know that those two are adjectives, but I might say the phrase great evil God, or I might just say the words great and evil. So what am I going to say about those words and what they mean? I might say the adjective great implies that it is the greatest, it's better and more powerful than anything else. And the adjective evil suggests that there's nothing good about this animal, that it's dangerous and horrific and terrible. Now this is what I made to help people revise and basically remember how to answer question 2. So you've got there that point, evidence, explain reminder and the little writing frame underneath. On the right there, I've put some subject terminology, so verb, noun, adjective, simile, repetition, etc. So again, don't be intimidated by this subject terminology, but if you are going to do some independent revision, working out what these words are and being able to spot them in an extract is something that you could work on in terms of your knowledge. What is an adjective and can you spot them in sentences? The time we know is 15 minutes, maybe just under, and the marks for this is only 8. 8 out of, for the whole paper, is 80, and only 8 out of the 40 marks for this reading section. Now we're going to move on to question 3. And we've said before, this is always exactly the same on every single exam, and it is, how has the writer structured the text to interest you as a reader? So a lot of people find this quite difficult, so let's just try and work out what structure means. Well, structure basically means how has this writer organised the information into paragraphs. So in the same way when you wrote a question 5 description and we said let's decide what we're going to put in each of the 3 paragraphs, in the same way you're being invited to say how has this writer organised their information into paragraphs, and why might that interest somebody reading it. So the basic structure of any text is a beginning, a middle and an end. And because this is a tricky question, my advice to students is to just make a couple of points about the beginning of the text and the end of the text, and just focusing on those 2 aspects of structure, the beginning and the end. And we have, like for question 2, a points, evidence and explanations, so this 3-step, and a writing frame to help you write your answer. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the beginning of the text. We're just going to look at the first couple of sentences or the first paragraph, but just the very beginning. And we're going to work out what is the main focus of that paragraph. What's the writer decided to write about at the beginning? And then we're going to back it up with a quote and say why that might be interesting. So let's look at the first paragraph, or the beginning of this extract that we've been given, and we've already read it for question 1. The jungle was high, the jungle was broad, there were sounds of music and flying tents filling the sky, and those were pterodactyls soaring with huge grey wings. So it will generally be either, the focus will be either setting, where are we in the story, and a description of the setting, or it might be a character, or it might be an event, a bit of plot. So this extract is focused on the setting, and in this first part where you make a point, you're going to use some of these words. So I might say, in the beginning of the text, the writer focuses on a description of this strange setting, and I've used there some subject terminology. I've used the word beginning, I've used description, I've used the word setting, so I'm getting marks for my use of subject terminology. And then I'm just going to simply back it up by any quote that's relevant to my point about it being about the setting. The jungle was high and the jungle was broad. So I've done the first 2 bits, and the last bit I need to do is think, why might this beginning interest someone? So we'll look at that on the next slide. Okay, so we've looking at that beginning, and we've established that the main focus is the setting. There'll always be a sort of a little bit of a combination of character, setting and plot going on at any one time, but it's about what's the main focus. We've backed it up with a quote, and now we've got to think about why it might interest someone in reading this story. And what I've done at the bottom is I've made a kind of list of things that you could use, things why a story might be interesting. So it might be that you sympathise with the predicament of the character, or you feel sorry for the main character. Obviously there's no character in this, so we wouldn't use that. It could be that the plot is shocking, or it's funny, or it's sad, and that might get your interest. But this one, I think I would say this interests the reader because it's a very strange and odd setting. We're in the middle of a prehistoric jungle, and I'm curious as to what is going to happen in this very strange setting. So that's that last bit, thinking about why that could interest someone, and you could usefully sort of learn these potential reasons in yellow at the bottom as part of your revision, because they pretty much fit any beginning or any end. So that's the 3 parts to making your point evidence explain for question 3. Okay, so now I've talked about the structure in relation to the beginning, and now I'm going to talk about the end of the extract. And this is the last, it's a single sentence paragraph, and this is how it ends. It says, like a stone idol, like a mountain avalanche, Tyrannosaurus fell. So let's see if I can go through this process again. So what am I going to say is the main focus of this last paragraph? Well, I'm going to say at the end of the text, the writer focuses on a dramatic event here. Nobody really reading the extract expected this T-Rex to be killed quite like this. So at the end of the text there is a surprising event with the character of the T-Rex being killed. It says Tyrannosaurus fell, might be my quote. So let's think about why that might interest somebody for that last part. Okay, so I'm looking at my options that I've got prepared about reasons why people get interested in reading something. So I think that this interests the reader because actually it's shocking. We don't expect the T-Rex to die like this. All the way through the story they've been saying it can't be killed. So this interests the reader because it's shocking and surprising, it interests us because we're surprised by the event. And so here you've got the kind of key things to remember for how to answer that question. So you've got those that structure, point, evidence, explain, and you've got the 2 little writing frames and the subject terminology with the green highlighting that you want to try and use, and some ideas for reasons why a piece of text might be of interest to somebody reading it. And again, it is just to remember, everybody finds this probably the most difficult question. You're only going to spend just under 15 minutes on it. It's only 8 marks. If you can make a couple of points like this, then that's really all you need to do to be on track to get your grade 4s. Okay, so here we are on the final question, question 4, which sometimes is called the statement question. And as we said at the beginning, we want to leave ourselves half an hour to do this. So don't get stuck on those language, question 2, structure, question 3 questions. Don't let time run away with you and find that this high scoring 20-mark question, you don't give yourself enough time. Half an hour before the end of the exam, I would suggest you stop what you're doing and move to this question 4. So what are we going to be doing? So you get given a statement, and the way the exam board present it, they say a student said. I'm sure a student didn't say this, but at any rate, you get a statement that a fictitious student has said when they've read the text, giving their opinion about it, and you're invited to find evidence and really agree with it. That for the most part you're looking to find some agreement and see why it is this student thinks this, and look for evidence to back up the statement. Okay, so here's the question as it looks on the page, and on the page it obviously looks very, very long, but we've said previously that we're only really interested in little bits of the question. So we're really looking for this a student said. What is it that you're being invited to agree with? So let's have a look. It says this part of the story, so this line 31 to the end, where the men encounter the Tyrannosaurus Rex. Okay, so that's where we are again, but what are we agreeing with? Shows, here we go, Eccles is right to panic. The monster is terrifying. So that is what you are looking for evidence of. Is this character Eccles right to panic? Is the monster terrifying? Where is there evidence of that? Okay, so we've read the question, we know what it is we're looking for, and we're looking for evidence to support the statement that Eccles, the character Eccles, is right to panic and the monster is terrifying. And we're looking for quotes that back up this statement. So here is, again, I'm just looking at the very beginning, just to demonstrate that how to do it, and also to demonstrate that you can answer this question and make a point, even if you only read a very small portion of the text. So here is the first bit that they want us to look at. It can't be killed. Eccles pronounced this verdict quietly, as if there could be no argument. He had weighed the evidence, and this was his considered opinion. The rifle in his hands seemed like a toy gun. We were fools to come. This is impossible. Shut up, hissed Travis. Nightmare. Okay, so I definitely have a feeling that this guy's panicking, and I definitely feel like the monster's terrifying already. So what quotes could I use? Well, there's no real right or wrong quote here. I've highlighted a few here. I think the way the characters are talking shows me that they're panicking, and also this description of his rifle makes me feel like this monster is terrifying and can't be killed. So this is the process that we're going to go through. We're going to make a point and say why we agree, then we're going to back it up with a quote, and like the language question, we're then going to zoom in on the quote and explain it and say why we think this is evidence of this statement being true. So here's my little writing frame, and I'm always going to start like this. So I'm going to say, I agree that, and what am I agreeing with? I'm going to mention the statement. So I agree that Eccles is right to panic because he hasn't got any way of defending himself from this T-Rex. It says his rifle, the rifle seemed like a toy gun. So I've made a point, I've mentioned the statement, and I've backed it up with a quote. You know, I agree that the monster seems terrifying because all the characters are panicking. It says, shut up, hissed Travis. Okay, and then here is here's this process again, using this quote, the rifle seemed like a toy gun. So again, I'm going to start it with, I agree that Eccles is right to panic because he doesn't feel that he can defend himself against the T-Rex. He hasn't got any weapons or any way of defeating this T-Rex. It says the rifle seemed like a toy gun, and the adjective toy shows how useless he feels like his rifle, his gun is going to be to defend himself. And here's the final little revision slide that summarises that process for question 4. So step 1, find the statement, make sure you're clear in your own mind. What do you have to agree with? You'll probably already have some ideas about whether you agree with it and why. And then present your reasons by starting with, I agree that, mention the statement, the monster's terrifying because, the way it's described is utterly terrifying and scary. It says, maybe you'd put a quote in there of that description, and then zooming in on the words in your quote and explaining further why you think this shows that this monster's terrifying and that these characters are right to panic. And you're going to try and use the time to make 3 points. I would aim for 3 different quotes, 3 different examples where this monster seems terrifying.